Hey everybody, Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles, and this is our monthly gathering of the Hopium community. I'm really grateful that you're all here tonight, and for those who are watching the recording later. We got a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to dive right into it, and this will take about 25 minutes, the initial presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. And I'm just grateful for everyone in the chat who are here from all over the country. We have a wonderfully vibrant, plucky, committed group of proud patriots who love their country and who are fighting hard every day here at Hopium. I'm particularly grateful for those of you who've joined this campaign we have to raise money for the key House races. We've already raised $90,000 in just a day and a half, and our goal by June 30th was 250. So we're off to a great start. So thank you all. Yeah, amazing work. Thank you all for that. And if you haven't joined that yet, check it out on the Hopium site. Let me tell you where I think we are. Let me give you my basic take on things. Joe Biden is a good president. The country is better off. We have a very strong case for re-election. The Democratic Party is strong. We're winning elections all across the country. We're raising tons of money. And we're in the process of building the most powerful political machine that we've ever had. And what do the Republicans have? They have Trump, who's the ugliest political thing that any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. And their party looks far more like a raging dumpster fire than it does a well-oiled political machine. Let's break that down, those three things. Number one, Joe Biden has been a good president. When Joe Biden came into office in January 2021, he inherited one of the worst day ones of any president in American history. The vaccines had not been distributed. Trump had just grossly mismanaged the COVID pandemic. The American economy was in deep recession. The global economy was teetering. We had just had the first time in American history where there had not been a peaceful transfer of power. There was not a traditional transition. There had been an assault on our Capitol, an attempt to overturn a legitimate election and end American democracy for all time, and install a right-wing dictator into the United States. All of those things were happening when Joe Biden, and in this city where I live, there was the National Guard occupied the Capitol area for 50 days, right? And so he inherited one of the worst day ones of any president in American history. And what he promised was to get us to the other side of COVID. I mean, that was the central promise of his campaign. And he's done so successfully. We have the strongest economy of any advanced economy in the world today. Our GDP rate has grown at twice the level of most of the other G7 countries during this period. We have the lowest inflation rate of any advanced economy in the world. We have the best job market since the 1960s, the lowest uninsured rate in American history. The Economist just wrote a piece in the last week talking about this unprecedented startup boom in America, which is obviously, as all of you know, having a huge explosion of startups is a great sign of the health and vitality of the American economy, and the can-do spirit of the American people is alive and well. The deficit is trillions of dollars less. We know that these three big bills that Biden passed, these big investment bills, are not only dramatically accelerating the necessary energy transition to a more sustainable future, but are also going to be creating jobs and opportunities for American workers for a generation to come. We're far better off today than when Joe Biden came into office. The crime rate has plummeted. Last year, in terms of our energy future, we saw record production of oil and gas and renewables. We're more energy independent than any time in decades in America today. And we had more oil produced last year, not only in American history, but than any country's ever produced in the history of the world. We've become an energy powerhouse, the United States, and we're leading the world in that regard. And I think that part of what's happening right now, because of the success of the Biden presidency, is that most of the central attacks on Biden have evaporated. Oh, I left out, by the way, that the stock market is breaking records and the Dow hit 40,000 for the first time. The Dow, by the way, in March of 2020 was 20,000. It's doubled in the last 4 years, helping American people be far wealthier, and people have far better retirements because of all that, right? Enormously important. And so to me, most of the central attacks on Biden have evaporated. Most of the central Republican attacks. The economy's strong, it's not weak. Inflation's down, it's not up. Crime rates across the country, murder rates are plummeting, they're not rising. Even the border, which is an area where I think they had an advantage on us. Donald Trump, in a moment of his repeated idiocy, decided to he ended up killing this bipartisan border bill, which meant that if you want the border to be dealt with, and if you don't like the chaos on the border, then you got to vote Democrat, because it's the Democratic Party that has been pushing a bipartisan solution to deal with the border crisis that we have now. And it's Republicans who want to maintain that crisis and keep America less safe. We also know that just in the last few months, the flow to the border has plummeted from where it was last year. We've seen a huge drop off in the flow to the border. And the two central attacks that the Republicans have made on Biden of him as a leader, the Biden crime family story, we've learned through reporting now, the Biden crime family story actually was a Russian disinformation operation laundered into the United States, by willing Republican congressional leaders. And then finally, his age, which is going to be an issue in this election. And the way I like to talk about it is that, I think he assuaged a lot of people's concerns with his strong performance at the State of the Union. He assuaged a lot of DC insider concerns by a very strong performance at the White House Correspondents' Dinner just a few weeks ago. He showed that he's willing to debate Donald Trump head on, right? In June and September, we've now got 2 debates on the schedule, showing confidence and strength in his ability to go in front of the American people, right? But also what's happened, I think, with his age, and I think this is important for us to argue, is that Joe Biden's been a successful president because of his age, not in spite of it. That having a president come into the Oval Office in that time I described, one of the worst day ones of any president in our history, who was the most experienced president to enter the Oval Office in our history, was a blessing for the country and not a curse. And that we need to view his age both as an asset and a liability as we go forward in this election. And so I think Joe Biden's been a good president. I think the country's far better off. And I think we have a lot to sell to the American people in this election. Number 2, the Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country. We're raising tons of money. I think one of the biggest stories of this election that is still underreported is the very significant financial and organizational advantages that we have as Democrats. We know that since Dobbs, we have been winning and they've been underperforming. We've been overperforming, they've been struggling. It's happened again and again in election after election. Republicans have been underperforming based on expectations. It happened in the midterm elections in 2022, where we picked up a Senate seat, 4 state legislative chambers, 2 governorships, when we were supposed to get our butt kicked in the red wave election. It happened throughout 2023, where we won a Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin, and Colorado Springs and Jacksonville, Florida, 2 of the largest Republican cities in the country, flipped. And we flipped Virginia and took away the 6-week abortion ban in Ohio. 2023 was a blue wave year. We had extraordinary performance all across the country, all throughout 2023. And that basic dynamic of their struggle and our overperformance has shown up now again in 2024. I think we've had 1 election since the spring of 2022, just 2 years ago, right, when Dobbs got leaked around this time 2 years ago. That we've had this 1 election, and that you've seen it show up in the Tom Suozzi race, where we were told that was going to be the bellwether that was going to tell us everything about the election in 2024. And the polling had Suozzi up 1, 2, 3 points. And we won by 8 points. The struggle for the Republicans has shown up in the polling and the voting in the Republican primaries. Trump in this election has been underperforming his polls. He underperformed every poll done in the early states, with the exception of 1 when Haley was still in the race, some by very large margins, meaning that when people went to go vote, they were voting for somebody other than Trump. It was a rejection of MAGA and the politics of MAGA. And what we've seen also in the Haley vote has continued to get 15, 20, 25% long after she got out of the election. So I think what we're seeing now is this same basic dynamic playing out, where the Democratic Party is strong because of all of you, because the money that you're raising. We have the biggest campaigns that we've ever had. We can control the information environment. We can push our performance on the ground to the upper end of what's possible again and again and again, because of all of you who are doing the work for all of us and giving us the resources and the passion and the volunteerism that's making us into the strongest democratic political machine we've ever had. And on their side, they are struggling again and again and again. And where you're seeing it is then in this today, and I don't have the final numbers, and I meant to go check before I came on, but we have like a 3 to 4 to 1 cash on hand advantage over the Republicans. There's never been that kind of advantage of one party over another this late in the cycle in recent elections. our general election operation is very advanced. We've got offices set up in all the battleground states. We've got competent people running the campaign. They've got nothing happen on their side. They're struggling to raise hard dollars. Their campaign apparatus is a mess. They've had leading Republican officials indicted in many of the battleground states. There's an unprecedented rebellion against Donald Trump in the Republican Party. I mean, he did get Haley's endorsement today, which is meaningful for him. But you've seen, two former vice presidents, former party nominee, former party chairman, former vice presidential nominee, former Speaker of the House, dozens of leading Republican officials who served under Trump are now working against him. We've never seen anything like that. The scale, scope, power, and the permission structure that's being created for Republicans to not vote for MAGA. It's my view that what happened with Dobbs happened is that a big chunk of the Republican Party became loosened from the Republican Party. The party had gone too far. It was too much. And they're skeptical of following MAGA's leadership. It's not just shown up in voting, but it's shown up in money. I think many of the $500 and $1,000 donors of the Republican Party, the traditional conservative Republicans who have money, have been holding back their money to MAGA, which is why we just keep outraising them and by substantial margins in all these races. We go in, and I want to say we're 5.5 months before Election Day, but we're only 4 months away from when the voting begins, right? The voting begins in this election on September 20th. It's only 4 months away. It's soon, right? Early voting in Minnesota and Virginia begins on September 20th. And so as we've built something very powerful together. They look like a raging dumpster fire, right? And then finally, Trump. I think that he's far weaker than he was in 2020. He's more degraded as a candidate. He's more impulsive and erratic. He's making unbelievable mistakes on a daily basis when he speaks in public. He's came out against the ACA. That was a huge mistake. His positioning on abortion, and we'll come back to that, was a huge mistake. Just yesterday, he said we're looking at getting rid of contraception, right? And the campaign tried to walk that back. Once a week now, he is making the kind of errors that candidates make who lose elections by giving us fodder and material that we can use in ads against him in the general election. His performance on the stump is erratic and degraded. He's far less of an effective showman than he was in previous elections. Number two is that I think that, as I mentioned, that the structure underneath him is far weaker. They don't have a strong campaign apparatus. And one of the things we'll talk about in the Q&A is that you can't make up their hard dollar crisis. You need hard money, money from regular people to fund presidential elections, because of something called the lowest unit rate. TV ads in the battleground are people who run federal elections. They pay the lowest unit rate by law. It's the lowest, and so they get, let's say, an ad for Biden cost $1. Super PAC has to go buy ads in a bidding process in these battleground states where to match that $1, they got to spend $3, $4, $5 because of the nature of our system. And Donald Trump is not going to outraise Joe Biden by 3, 4, 5 to 1. We're outraising them right now, right? And so they've got to, I think that as we prosecute this campaign, we not only have a better candidate, better arguments, we have a far better apparatus to go prosecute this campaign. And then finally, I think that the American people are about to come to learn 6 things about Donald Trump that they didn't know about him in 2020 when he lost the election that I think are going to be significant. Number one is that he raped E. Jean Carroll in a department store dressing room. Number two, that he led one of the largest financial frauds in American history, and he's been fined hundreds of millions of dollars, and he and his 2 sons have been banned from doing large amounts of business in New York State. 3, that he stole America's secrets. He lied to the FBI about it. He shared those secrets with other people. And now we just learned last night, in reporting that's been done over the last 24 hours, that even after the FBI did the raid and took all the boxes away, he still kept documents in his bedroom, top secret documents. We also know, and there's testimony now about this, that his PAC scanned some of those documents into a laptop, right? I mean, we're talking about the greatest betrayal of the country by any former president without anything remotely close to this in all of our history. 4th is that he led an insurrection against the United States. He tried to overturn our democracy. He led an armed attack on the Capitol, a few years ago. And now he's promised to finish the job and end American democracy for all time if he gets into the White House in January 2025. 5th, he and his family have corruptly taken more money from foreign governments than any family in American history. And even just this week, The Russian-aligned Serbian government just granted Jared Kushner a real estate deal that's worth close to $500 million. And it's like Kushner's got his big bag open for Russian allied sources to throw money into it. And taking, and we're seeing now, as Ben Rhodes, who used to work for Barack Obama, this is the most extraordinary, naked, raw corruption that has ever been conducted by any American set of actors in all of our history. And then finally, sixth, and perhaps the most important, is that he is singularly responsible for ending Roe and stripping the rights and freedoms away of more than half the population. And in the last few weeks, in a moment that I call his idiocy and his diminishment and his extremism and his Trumpness, he announced that he's for states' rights on abortion. And he believed he was being clever and he was kind of finding a middle ground position. But by being for states' rights, what that means is that you're for Idaho. And if you're for Idaho, then you are for a total ban, jail time for doctors, anti-trafficking stuff, right? Where if you bring a minor across the border to get an abortion, to get health care that she needs, that you are subject to arrest and indictment. And if he's okay with Idaho anywhere, he's okay with it everywhere. And what Trump really did in his idiocy and his diminishment and his delusion and is that he came out and reaffirmed that he's the most dangerous abortion extremist in America today. I don't know how a candidate survives any one of those six things. He has to survive all six of them. And I don't think he has either the political talent and skill to do so, nor the campaign to withstand what's about to come. And so when I look at all of that stuff, right, strong Biden presidency, incredible campaign apparatus, our financial advantages, we've been winning everywhere, we're raising tons of money, you guys are kicking ass and doing all the work that you're doing. We have strong Senate polling, strong House polling, the congressional generic looks good, right? I would much rather be us than them. I'm not telling you that we're going to win the election, but the way I've been describing it recently is that we're a higher seeded team in a tournament and we should win, but we'll only win if we do the work, right? We have to go win it. We have to go win this thing. And I would much, and in every way possible at this moment, right? 4 months out from when voting begins, I would much rather be us than them. And I feel like we've got, I am confident that if we execute and do the work, that we're going to win this thing. In terms of polling, let me just say two last things. In terms of polling, I just want to acknowledge, sorry, I've got an itchy nose here. Spring, right? Spring out the window. Is that, Donald Trump is not winning this election. He's not ahead in this election. He's not favored in this election. We have a close competitive election where neither candidate is ahead. And frankly, neither candidate is where they really want to be. I want to talk about this for a minute because I think this is very important. And I've been writing about this a lot in Hopium. And there's new polling out tonight, this afternoon, that came out from a credible polling outfit that had Biden ahead in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. We've now had polling in the last few weeks showing Biden ahead in Arizona, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, tied in Nevada, and within margin of error in Georgia and North Carolina. We've had 4 polls showing us within 2 points in North Carolina in the last few weeks. And we, importantly, for Trump to win the election, he has to win one of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I want everyone to sort of go through this with me for a minute because this is really important. When you see on the screen 7 polls, 7 states, and Trump leading, in 4 or 5 of them, and Biden leading in 1 or 2 of them, that doesn't mean Trump's winning the election or even winning these states, right? In the last 4 major battleground, or actually the last 5 now, major multi-state battleground polls, and if, for the New York Times, I'm going to use the likely voter part of their poll and not the registered voter part of their poll. In the 5, Donald Trump is not winning outside of margin of error in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, which means that he's losing the election, or at least not winning it. And it is not possible. He cannot win. So we can lose Arizona, we can lose Georgia, we can lose North Carolina, right? We can lose Nevada. If we win those 3 blue wall states and win Nebraska, which I think we will, we win the election. And so for Trump to be leading, he has to be leading in states that get him to 270 outside of the margin of error. And that has not happened in the last 5 polls taken. So it is inaccurate and wrong describe what we're looking at, the data that we're looking at, as to conclude that Donald Trump is leading ahead, favored in the election. It's a close competitive election. More polls in recent weeks have shown Biden ahead than Trump ahead. We had our best battleground state polls of the entire election cycle today. Even the polls that came out from Bloomberg today showed dramatic movement towards Biden in virtually every state, right? Everything is fine, folks, right? We have a lot of work to do. We're not where we want to be. But again, I would much rather be us than them. It's like, think of this as a tie game after the first quarter. We got 3 quarters of the game to go. And, we got a stronger team, better offense, right? They got players who are hurt. They have players who are in jail, right? And, we should go out and be able to go win this thing. And then finally, let me just conclude that, that I think that why are we all here? And is that I want to do this. Some of you have heard this rap before, but I want to do this because I think it's really important as kind of a grounding thing. Why are we all here? I'm here. And the reason I'm with you tonight in my son's bedroom is that is because of the speech that Joe Biden referred to in his State of the Union, the speech that FDR gave in January of 1941, where Biden talked about how that speech was the speech that rallied America to go win the war, win World War II. It was the beginning of the process of the American people rising up and going to defeat fascism. And to me, Biden referred to that war as as the speech that FDR gave in the State of the Union, because he was giving a State of the Union speech. And it was remarked at the time, it was unusual for him to have begun the speech that way, rather than talking about the economy or healthcare or the border or whatever else. But he came to us and said that he wanted to, he understood the moment that he was in as being similar to the moment that FDR was in January of 1941. Pretty profound kind of evocation of a moment in our history. And I want to remind people about what that speech was really about, because that speech also became known as the Four Freedoms speech. It was the speech where FDR articulated in a very powerful and historic way that he wanted to build a world that was based around fundamental freedoms, four freedoms, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Unbelievably elegant, simple, powerful articulation of the world that we all live in today. And he wanted a world that was based on these freedoms and not based on dominion, where a country or a person had dominion over another, but people had freedom, countries had freedom. And those four freedoms became the basis of the Atlantic Charter negotiated between FDR and Churchill that became the basis of the alliance that won World War II. Those four freedoms were in the United Nations Charter in 1945 that created an international understanding that one nation could not have dominion over another nation, control over another nation, that nations were sovereign in international law. It was the foundation of the new world that we all built together after World War II. They became in the foundation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 that was negotiated by Eleanor Roosevelt in part, that articulated for the first time in international law that individuals had rights, human rights, not the rights of states, which had been part of what law was about, but that individual people had rights and freedoms, not just nation states. And that world that FDR imagined, the world of four freedoms and the Pax Americana, has over the last 80 years created a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive in the history of the world than over these last 80 years. We've seen literacy rates triple during this time. Life expectancy has gone from 45 years to 71 years. We've seen more people live under democracies than any other time in human history. And we've seen extreme poverty rates plummet to incredibly low levels despite huge explosion of our population in the world since 1945. There's never been a better time to pursue your dreams of whatever kind of person you were than in these last 80 years, the 80 years of the four freedoms. And what's important to us as we go get ready to go win this election together is that that golden age in human history was created by the Democratic Party of America. We did that together. We created a golden age in human history. It wasn't just the United States, it was us who did that, our party, our values, our understandings of the world. And that we are maybe the most consequential political force for good and have done more good for more people than any other organized political force in all of human history. That's our legacy. That's who we are, right? And what's important about what Biden was saying to us was that, the nation, the people of the United States and the Democratic Party were called once before, and we rose to the challenge. And the reason why I'm so fundamentally optimistic and confident that we're going to win this election is because all of you proud patriots who love your country are answering the call this time. We're being called again as Democrats to rise up and ensure that freedom and democracy prevail here and everywhere. And all of you are answering that call. We're seeing it in the money that's being raised and the phone calls that are being done, the postcards that are being written, the information warriors spreading information through our networks, all the things that we do. It's a manifestation of love of country and patriotism that is so powerful. And I know this because I speak to all of you all the time. I do these events all over the country. I get all this energy and this passion from all of you every time I speak. And I know the reason that we're going to prevail is because of the love of country, the power that all of you are exhibiting, and the greatness and goodness of the Democratic Party. What MAGA wants, what China and Russia and Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas want, they want to return to our world of dominion and not freedom. We are not going to let that happen. We want to make sure that our kids and our grandkids and the kids and the grandkids of the world have the same opportunities all of us have had. That's what this election's about. We're going to leave it all on the playing field, everybody, and we're going to win this thing and go kick their ass. Thank you so much for being here. I'm anxious to get to questions, and I'm just great to be in community with all of you. Let me go to the Q&A and just get a sense of what's on people's minds tonight, and I'll come back. Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a series of questions about. Let me just sort of get a sense of where people's heads are at here, and I'll try to answer them about what I think is the most important ones. Yeah, I want to talk first of all about. I want to talk about something about polling that I've really been exploring over the last few days that gets to a bunch of the questions here. Is that Tom Bonnier and I had a long talk yesterday, and I'm going to release it on Friday, but we did a presentation for a group last week on polling, and it was sort of we didn't really have our act together totally. It was sort of the first effort. Tom and I have decided that we sort of need to engage in this. We haven't wanted to engage, but I want to just give you a thought about how to think about polling as we go forward, which is a couple things. And Tom and I are going to write a piece together that's going to come out in the next few weeks. I've sort of done an initial scratch of it, and we're going to work on it together. Number one about polling is that think of polling like an impressionist painting and not like a photograph, right? And that it's fuzzy, it's not precise. There's a degree of uncertainty behind all polling. I think the accuracy of polling is being oversold by many of the commentators on television. Number two is that polling can't predict anything. It can't tell you anything about tomorrow. All it can do is tell you about today. And that's another thing I think that is sometimes gets confused in the commentary. But I think number three, the thing that I'm going to write about is this idea that what's happening in the way that we discuss polling is that we are not acknowledging the tension in the data. And let me just talk about this for a second. So if you have an ABC poll that shows Biden up 5, which we had a few weeks ago, and a CNN poll that same week that showed Biden down 6, how do you reconcile that, right? Like, how do you make sense of that? One, Trump's winning the election outside margin of error. The other one, Biden's winning the election outside of margin of error. And the way that we currently reconcile that is that we average the polls together. And if you average those two polls together, you get Donald Trump winning by a point. And a close election, but Trump ahead, right? Neither poll said that. One poll said Trump was winning the election outside margin of error, and the other one said Biden was winning the election outside margin of error. And the average then creates a new reality that neither poll actually discussed, or contemplated, which is that it's a close competitive election with Trump having an advantage. And so the question is whether or not averaging those two polls is a legitimate way of reconciling the tension of the two polls. And wouldn't it be better if we were to acknowledge that there's a bunch of polls over here saying one thing and a bunch of polls over here saying another thing? And my God, it's really hard to understand where the election is. And we should be conservative about our interpreting all of this to believe that there is an answer. the thing about this average thing that Nate Silver created is it created a false impression that the election is actually sitting in one place, as opposed to sitting in a range of possibilities, right? And that's why when I talk about the election, what I'm really talking about is what I think is the likely scenario about what's going to happen. We have no idea what's going to happen this election. We have debates now. I think that's really good, by the way. I think it's good for the country. I think it's good for Joe Biden. We didn't have those a week ago. The election changed. Nikki Haley endorsed. The election changed. The election's going to change. The way to think about polling is that polling gives you kind of a range of possibilities. And what we're doing is we're trying to, rather than acknowledging the tension and that not everything is pointing in the same direction, which is how I saw the election in 2022, we're creating these kind of artificial ways of reconciling these tensions that I think are creating a misunderstanding of the way that polling really works, which is that it's imprecise. It's giving you a notion. It's an impressionist painting, not a photograph. And I think that what I try to do in my analysis is to explain to you. And so let me give you an example of what Tom and I would like to see, which is the New York Times last week had 3 sets of data available to them in their polling. They had registered voters, likely voters in their state polls, and then they did a national poll, a second poll with a different pollster. In the first poll of registered voters, which was the headline and the big news, Trump's leading in 5 out of 6 states. And by the way, they didn't even poll North Carolina, which was a concession to Trump and the Republicans. There's 7 battleground states, there isn't 6. So they did registered voters. Trump's leading in 5 of the 6 states. And he's in that poll, he's ahead in the election. He's leading. He gets 270 potentially, right? In the likely voter poll, the election, he doesn't get to 270. We're in margin of error in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So the election is tied, basically. Trump doesn't have an advantage or is leading. And then in the third set of data, Biden's ahead by 3 points and winning the election, right? And the Times, rather than acknowledging the tension in the data and that not all the data was saying the same thing, they went with the interpretation of the registered voter numbers, which were the most advantageous to Trump. That was an editorial decision, and it was wrong. The Times shouldn't have done that. The Times should have acknowledged that there was tension in the data. It was not all pointing in the same direction. It's something the ABC News, Washington Post did a year ago when they did, when they had a poll that they thought was an outlier. They actually talked about their poll and they said, we think the numbers are kind of crazy because if you look at all these other polls over here, they say something else, and we're acknowledging that our poll may be an outlier, and they acknowledge the tension in the data. This is what we have to start doing, right? Because even I was interviewed yesterday in an interview, and somebody started reading to me all the CNN data, and I said, why are you using the poll to interview me? That is the most pro-Trump poll probably taken in the last 3 or 4 months. When I can show you 15 other polls that have completely different data than this, why are you using that one? Are you doing this to be provocative? Because it is a poll that was widely seen as an outlier. And if you're using it as the understanding of the election, you're not acknowledging the tension in the data. And this is part of what we're going to try to do, is to help all of us come to a place to understand that the idea that the election is sitting in a single place and there's a number, 46, 45, as opposed to a range, 42 to 47, is something where we're being misled, basically, I think by the political commentators who make money by analyzing polls and they're overselling the accuracy and underselling the tension in the data. So I just want to say that this is a new thing that it's part of my trying out new stuff tonight. And so I'm going to continue to talk about polling, because the truth is that Donald Trump, the foundation, those of you who've been in marketing, right, you have talk about this thing called brand architecture, where you build a brand. The foundation of Donald Trump's brand is that he's winning the election. And everything about what he's telling all of us, is that I'm winning, I'm strong, I'm winning. But he isn't winning. And we need to take away that foundation of his brand, because it's not true. And the truth is, it's a little bit like the Wizard of Oz, right? Like the curtain coming back from the wizard, is that he is not strong. He's weak. He's not powerful. He's pathetic, right? He's not traditional American, an orange guy, right? Like whatever the terms we're going to use. I think Guy, one of the original Hopium folks, has asked me to do this. I have this way of describing Trump, and I think we have to get better about saying this. Is that, my feeling about Trump is you can dye his hair, paint his face, strap a girdle on him and a diaper too, pump him full of speed, and the guy's still not going to look like a presidential candidate in 2024. And I do this as an exercise because there is a little bit of the emperor has no clothes with Trump, or the pulling the curtain back from the wizard. The guy is a disgusting pig. And it is, who's the most extreme, crazy person we've ever seen. He's the ugliest political thing we've ever seen. We can't let him pull off this fraud of him being a strong man as opposed to a weak man, a right-wing leader instead of a painted man. The idea that he paints his face and makes himself orange, how in the world is that a reflection of a strong man? It's a weak man. It's a pathetic man. It's an insecure man. It's a crazy man, right? And so we can't let, as Timothy Snyder has said, we cannot obey advance. We cannot allow their attempt to spook us into believing that they're going to win this election. There's nothing that we can do, right? The way they're doing this, we're winning the election. You listen to Trump, best polling I've ever had. Total bullshit, by the way, right? Not true. Best polling I've ever had. And then the other thing they're doing to spook all of you is all this issue around voter intimidation and the games they're going to play, right? They want you to believe that the election is going to happen and there's nothing we can do to win. That even if we win the election, we're going to lose the election, right? All of this is a psychological operation to spook all of you to not go to work and go kick his ass. And we have to be aware of this, right? This is what Ruth Ben-Ghiat talks about and what Timothy Snyder talks about, which is the psychological work of what autocrats do, which is they want you to believe that resistance is futile. And they create all these mechanisms to convince you there's no reason to go work on the election. We're going to win by 5 points, and then they're going to take the election away from us, right? All these kind of boogeyman that exist. Don't give in to any of that, right? We've been in this recent period. We won in 2018. We won in 2020. We won in 2022. We won in 2023. We've been winning in 2024. We just keep kicking their ass. They're not strong. They're weak. We're strong. They're weak, right? We're united. They're divided. We can go through the whole list. Don't give in to this stuff. It's really, really important that you have discipline and be aware of the game that you're in here, right? Part of what I try to do at Hopium is to help you liberate yourself. It's like the Matrix for those of you who are science fiction, right? Like, I'm trying to liberate you from the right-wing noise machine stories they're telling, to understand that there is an objective reality, there is a truth, there is a path forward for us. And the reality is about our politics is there's been one really strong party in recent years, that's been us, and one really weak party that continues to lose elections, it's been them. And that's the likely scenario for what's going to happen in the fall. Let me go. I want to talk about Israel-Gaza a little bit, although I think that it's receded to a great degree in sort of the political intensity around it because colleges have come out. I want to just say a couple things about it. One is, we don't know what's going to happen, right? This is still unfolding. It's a live thing. The level of tragedy and heartbreak all around, right? I mean, I think that sometimes what gets left out in the daily discourse here among Democrats is that Hamas not only committed war crimes on October 7th, they commit war crimes every single day. They continue to hold the hostages, and that this war began because of Hamas, not because of Israel. And Israel is defending itself. And they may be defending themselves in reckless and dangerous ways. But at the end of the day, we're here because of Hamas. We're here because of Iran. We're here because of their allies, Russia. We're here because Hamas wants to end this world where freedom prevails over dominion. And that I believe that polling now has been very, very clear about this, that for many voters, this is a very second-tier issue. It would be highly unusual for this issue to be an issue that really drives the election of any constituency, of any group. Because what almost always prevails in what drives people's votes is the economy, healthcare, security. Am I safe, right? These things that are this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? These basic things like, am I getting ahead? Am I doing better? Do I feel like I'm safe? My family's safe, right? Am I scared about the world or our security? And what you see in polling, and even let me just go into young people, right? We've had two, pretty clear polls about this, right? The Harvard IOP poll, which is the gold standard 18 to 29-year-old poll in the United States, has just was out a few weeks ago, gave young people 16 choices of what's the most important issue. And Israel Hamas was 15th out of 16. In the new poll done by Axios like 2 weeks ago of college students, they gave people 10 choices of what's most important. Israel Gaza was 10th, right? There's a new poll today, a Siena poll, showing that in New York State, there was overwhelming support for, there was a sense that the protests had gone too far. They supported what the president did by calling for distinction between peaceful protests and not peaceful protests. And so I think it's unlikely that this issue is going to maintain the heat and intensity that we saw among certain people, over the last few months. But we'll see. I mean, we don't know. But I think that, and also let's see what happens. I mean, if I hope everyone realizes who've been a critic of Biden that, Joe Biden just built an entire pier in Gaza to help bring, to not be dependent on the Israelis and Bibi Netanyahu, right? To bring aid in, right? That was a pretty remarkable thing we just did to show our commitment to this. And let's hope. I won't say one final thing on this. What's really important, I think, about all this, my sort of big takeaway, is that the only person in this game right now who wants a two-state solution and Palestinian statehood alongside of Israel is Joe Biden. Bibi Netanyahu doesn't want it. Israel, Gaza and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran don't want it. They want Israel wiped off the face of the earth. And so the only way that we can understand how Palestinian statehood could happen, and without the elimination of Israel and all the Jews that live there, is through a two-state solution, right? It's the only way we have today to understand that. And the only person fighting for that, the only person who has a realistic plan for a Palestinian state is Joe Biden. And I think he deserves a little bit more credit, in my view, about that as we go forward. Let me go just look at a few more questions. Yeah, I'm not going to have a debate about. We're not going to have a debate. Everyone can go say what they want to say about Israel Gaza, but the idea that this war preceded what Hamas did, in my view, is absurd, and is, we're in this moment because Hamas attacked Israel, and there's no justification for what happened, and anybody who tries to justify the actions of what Hamas did is not welcome here at Hopium Chronicles, frankly. And so, because then you're justifying and supporting terrorism and the killing of Jews, which is not something that is appropriate in this community. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me just go a few questions about climate change. I think that for young people, for those who are concerned about young people, that the idea that what do we have to speak to them about, right? Best job market since the 1960s, lowest uninsured rate there's ever been for young people. We have booming stock market for young people who are investing in their future, right? Joe Biden has built these three plans that he's put forward are creating more jobs and opportunities for people of Gen Z and millennials, far more than any other generation, that will be giving them opportunities for a generation to come. But also importantly, Joe Biden has done more to accelerate the energy transition than any person alive in the world today. I mean, the IRA was the most consequential investment in countering climate change than any government has ever made in the history of the world. And I talk about how when statues are made of Joe Biden 25 years from now, the thing that they're going to credit him for is going to be the leader who turned the corner, we hope, on climate change. I mean, I think that part of what we're now in as Democrats is that we're in an era where, we have these two enormous existential challenges ahead of us: countering climate change and ensuring the planet doesn't warm. And then second is to ensure that freedom and democracy prevail here and everywhere. And that's what we're fighting for now, right? I mean, there's a lot of other things we're fighting for, right? But these are two things that we have to get right. There's a lot of things that we need to get right. These are two things we have to get right. And on these two things, Joe Biden has been a strong leader, a very strong, capable leader. And I think that this is going to be for all of us who are center left Democrats, whoever, whatever part of flavor of the party we're in, these are going to be the battles of the next 15 to 20 years, right? These are going to be over the arc of time. We have to get these things right. If we don't have democracy here, what do we have? If we can't stop the planet from warming, what do we have? And I think that we're going to be sort of, I think, forging ahead and building a new politics for the Democratic Party and for the country around making sure that we mobilize together around these big fights. And one of the other things I talked about this week in a piece I wrote was I do think the other thing we should be working on and thinking about is we need a big reform and renewal agenda. We need to come out and make it clear that we understand there's too much corruption in Washington, in the official part of Washington, not the city of Washington, but in the official part of Washington, and we need to lay a predicate for cleaning up our politics. It's really important. I think it's important for a lot of reasons. It's important politically because young people and independents, these issues really matter to them. They're voting issues for them. But it's also important because MAGA has corrupted Washington. We've seen unprecedented corruption by MAGA. And I think the most important corruption is not the Kushner Trump corruption being paid by foreign governments, but it's the corruption of the judiciary by the Roberts Court and by Alito and Thomas and by everything that's happened under Roberts' tenure. And that we've had a legit, we have a constitution, we have, I think, a legitimacy crisis with the Supreme Court that is going to need to be addressed in a profound and forceful way in coming years. I don't exactly know the best way to go about that, but I think that creating a narrative and a story that there's these things that have corrupted our democracy, weakened the country, and rank corruption, right, of payments from foreign governments directly into the Trump family and so on that are ongoing in front of our eyes, the most naked corruption we've ever seen. We can't stand by without challenging that because we can't. The corruption of our judiciary is part of what is causing the descent of illiberalism of the Republican Party and MAGA. I mean, these things are connected; they're causal. I mean, in my view, in many ways, the thing that has caused the descent of the Republican Party into this illiberal place is the corruption of the judiciary and the Supreme Court, starting with, frankly, the decision in Bush v. Gore in 2000, where the Supreme Court realized they had the power to determine who was president of the United States. And they chose the president. The voters didn't chose the president. And you know that 3 of the Supreme Court justices now, Roberts, Kavanaugh, and forgetting her name, Coney Barrett, were lawyers on the Bush campaign in 2000 and prosecuted the case, that they ended up winning eventually in the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court gave Bush the election in 2000, and then as a reward for that, the Supreme Court and the Republican Party put those people who prosecuted that case in front of the Supreme Court onto the Supreme Court. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I think that we don't have, I think right now, adequate language and narratives and stories and arguments about the corruption of the judiciary and the need to reform it. And I think it has to be part of a broader agenda of renewal and reform that we're running on. I think this is vital. I think I think Biden has a very strong case. He's got a good agenda for the second term. This is a missing piece that I think we have time to develop and take to the American people. And I'm going to be continuing to advocate for that. Okay, let me go into the Q&A here. So yes, Catherine, I just answered your question, I think. You all saw that a second Alito flag came out today. It's in the New York Times, right? So he flew, and I'll be posting either tomorrow or Friday about this particular flag. It's a different flag than the flag. It wasn't the upside down American flag. It was a flag to signal his support of a right-wing Christian nationalist movement in the United States. And it's important that we educate ourselves about what this flag represents. and I'm not going to get into it tonight because I also want to brush up on it a little bit. I had the last time I read about this was a few months ago, and I'd rather just post things that you can read. But it's a fairly significant development because the core of this Christian nationalist faith that he's expressing adherence to believes that the church has primacy over government, and which is obviously the exact opposite that many of us believe about how our country was created in the 18th century. Another person who has flown that flag outside of his office, has been the Speaker of the House, by the way. And so, this is something that we need to get to know and learn about, because it's a radical vision of the relationship, between, in essence, it's a strategy for the dismantling of the government of the United States, and to weaken the federal government and weaken government in general, so people of faith have more control over their lives. And it is, to me, radically antithetical to everything that this country was founded on in the 18th century. And so this is now an important part of the debate. And I think it's also a disqualifier for Alito to continue to serve as a Supreme Court justice. But we're going to have that debate. Let's have that debate. Okay, let me go to a few more questions. We're getting to the end here. I want to say thank you all very much for all of this. Yeah, I see a bunch of questions. Let me go over just my one last thing, which is the theory of the endorsements, right? And what we're going to do together. So we're going to stick with Biden at national level, Biden, Arizona, and North Carolina. I think that we have enormous opportunities in North Carolina and Arizona this cycle because of Kari Lake and Mark Robinson and their extremism. We went in early there. We've raised a lot of money there. Many of you have been volunteering there. It's my view in the Electoral College that we should win Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. We've done very well there in those states in recent years. Not only do we have powerful governors like Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer, and the best state party in the country in Wisconsin, but we have labor is spending an unprecedented amount of money there, and we have more tools there to win than we've had in the past, and we've been winning there already, right? And we have strong governors who know how to win elections there, who are popular, that are going to be helping run the show. I feel good about those three. And frankly, we're doing best in those three states in the polling so far. And I want everyone to realize about Michigan, because there's always been a concern about Michigan. Michigan is without doubt of the 7 battleground states where we're doing the best in polling. We've had more leads in Michigan than any other state. And today, in this brand new set of polls that came out today, we were up 4 points in Michigan, which is about margin of error. The biggest lead we've had in any of the battleground states has been in Michigan. So for the concerns that people had about what had happened in Michigan, we're actually doing better there than any of the other 6 states. I talked to Jane Klebb today, who's the state party chair of Nebraska, because as all of you know, there's that blue dot in Nebraska, the one electoral college vote. We won it by 56% last time. She's very confident that we're going to win this time. And I'm going to be bringing Jane on. I want all of you to get to meet her. If you like Anderson Clayton, you're going to love Jane. And Jane's an old friend of mine. And to talk about Nebraska, because if we win Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and we win Nebraska, that's 270, we win the election, right? We win the one. So to me, the next tier where I think we have enormous opportunity is Arizona and North Carolina, which is why we've been so focused there. Nevada is always close. I mean, I know there was this crazy New York Times poll, but today there was a poll showing a dead even Nevada. I talked to Scott Fairchild, who ran Cortez Masto's race in 2022, and he's an old friend of mine, and he said, all the polling there is solid. We're okay. Like, I don't know why everyone's freaking out, right? And so, Nevada matters. Georgia, we've had now 2 polls in the last 2 days showing the race within margin of error, 3 points. So, I think the map looks good here, right? But the next thing is we're going to get involved in these House races, and we've got 11 now because we added Janelle Bynum today. And these are the 11 races that independent analysts say that are Republican-held seats where Democrats have the best opportunity. It's very simple. It took me a while to get this done because there were so many possible permutations. But the reality is, if we win these 11 seats, we flip the House, period. So this is a very, very clean, smart way to get into the House races. And then finally, I think in terms of just maybe 1 or 2 other things that we may do together, because I want to keep it short and narrow. Many of you have other obligations, right? that you've got to take care of, and job one is Biden Harris, right? That we all have to be working on is that I may add one or two more to the House races, but I don't know that we're going to add much more than this. I mean, I'm very comfortable with what we have. These have been smart investments we've made together. We've raised well over. We're probably at total raised through that I can like put track, not stuff that's come in over the transom. I mean, we're now probably at 1,000,000, 2,000,000, 3 somewhere in there, right? I haven't looked today. And for a small organization, small community, right? We've kicked ass and we've done our part here. And I think the fact we've raised $80,000 in these races, in the House races in the last 24 hours is remarkable. And my goal is to get to 250. If we can get to 500, that'd be even better. I've already had a bunch of the campaigns reach out to me. They're unbelievably grateful for us getting involved. And all of the candidates who we've endorsed will be coming and speaking at Hopium. Some of them may be live, some of them may be recorded, but you'll get to hang out with me and them, right, at some point in the next couple of months. And so you get to know these people who are going to be the difference makers for us to win or lose the House. I think we're going to flip the House. I think the Senate's going to go down to election day. I mean, I want everyone to know that polling in the Senate is good. We're not behind in any race that we need to be behind in. Montana and Ohio are holding, right? These are going to be close elections, but these are powerful. These are very strong incumbents, and they should win. And we should win in Nevada. We should win in Arizona. We should win in Michigan. We should, and I think that my final point I want to make about this is that, I think the thing I'm really proud of about what we've done, not because as I wrote yesterday, is that we've been involved in all these races and we've been winning elections all over the country together. I think that when I look back at this cycle, the most important thing we may have done is the investments we've made in North Carolina and Anderson Clayton. I mean, because Anderson's becoming a superstar, right? She's becoming she's not just a party chair of North Carolina. She's becoming an important national leader for the Democrats. And this is a state where we've underperformed. We haven't had the structure, the campaign apparatus underneath. And we needed to widen the map. We needed to prosecute. We needed to not make it easy for Trump. Every state we put into play, it gets harder for them to win. And North Carolina, like Wisconsin, has also been overtaken by extremists. And we're not only helping win a state pragmatically and electing a good governor and preventing a crazy MAGA guy from coming in, and this woman who's running as the superintendent of public schools is one of the craziest MAGA people in the country. We're also helping liberate a purple state from control of extremists that is dragging a battleground purple state into a place that is just inconsistent with what North Carolina is. And so there's just something also inherently good and virtuous about what we're doing. We're helping a young, powerful leader emerge and become a national leader for the Democratic Party. We're helping a critical battleground state. We're helping Josh Stein become the next governor of North Carolina. We're helping prevent this crazy guy, Mark Robinson, and his fellow MAGAs from taking over. But we're also doing something that feels even more important than all of that, which is that we're going to start liberating these states that have been hijacked by MAGA. And that's a project that's, it happened by flipping the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. We began that process in Wisconsin. We're now doing it. It's already happened in Pennsylvania. It's happened in Michigan, right? And we need to do it now in North Carolina. And so I'm really grateful to all of you who played a role in that. I'm in touch with Anderson. It's so amazing how many of you have met her. I get reports all the time. Everybody loves her. She's like the golden child of this cycle. She's the superstar of this cycle. And we played a role in that, everybody. We got in really early with her and have helped elevate her up. I mean, she met a lot of people through us and through our community. And I'm really proud of that. And I'm really proud because we took a gamble on somebody that I felt really had this potential to become somebody bigger than just a state party chair. And it's happening in front of our eyes. And it's just awesome to watch. And so hats off to all of you in North Carolina. Hats off to all of you who played a role in this. Hats off to our dear friend Anderson, who's just kicking ass and doing amazing things. And thanks to all of you. I mean, we're going to win this thing, but we need to go do the work, not lose faith. Don't let them spook us. Don't give into the bullshit every day, right? Fight hard every day. Stay engaged. Stay positive. Be responsible for the sentiment you're putting out into the world, right? We have to take greater responsibility. They want negative sentiment. We want positive sentiment. We want the country to feel good about itself. They want it to feel better about ourselves. Stay positive, keep working hard, and remember, Joe Biden's a good president. The country's better off. The Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country. We have significant now organizational and financial advantages. And what do they have? They have Trump, the ugliest political thing that any of us have ever seen. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. And thanks for all that you do for your country.